So I'm excited to start a new sermon series here, and it's titled Promised Land. Look at that. And that is a picture of Israel. You don't actually picture it looking like that sometimes, but it's beautiful. I want to ask you this question. When do you want results? Now. Yesterday, actually, right? Like, hey, come on, let's go. Let's get this done. We all live in this instant get results now society, right? I mean, microwave popcorn, they always say sliced bread is a great thing, but I mean, microwave popcorn, y'all, that is great. 3 minutes, we've got popcorn. It's awesome. Fast food, we need a quick meal, we run through fast food. How many weight loss programs, don't raise your hand like because you're on it, but like, come on. How many weight loss programs are like, hey, you take this pill, you do this thing, you just don't have to do anything. Sit on the couch and you lose weight. It's amazing. Right? I mean, seriously, we're all about it. We're like, oh, yeah, sign me up for that. How many get-rich-quick schemes are there out there? Right? Like, come on. We want it now. We want the results sometimes without putting in the work. And I have this one in my notes, but it's kind of like contradictory because I hate self-checkout. But we do it because we want to, like, there's a long line. We're like, oh, self-checkout. But I'm like, I want to, like, let somebody check out for me. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing there. But we want success, man. We want it without the work. We want to succeed without sometimes putting in the work necessary to be successful. And doesn't it irk you that some people, it feels like they get it just handed to them? Anybody feel like it's just like, why are they so successful? It's just like they got the golden touch, and it just seems like promotion and blessings and inheritance and all these things just get passed down to that person or these type of people. Success, promotions, leadership, inheritance. It's just given. Well, when we read this here in Joshua, Promised Land is about the book of Joshua, and we're going to take this through the book of Joshua in our new sermon series here. But starting out in chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, it says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give to them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot as I promised Moses. Bucky, I'm going to hire you right now. Can you grab my 2 drinks over by my guitar and bring them? Can you do that for me? I didn't think this through here. We mixed it up, and it mixed up my routine. Usually I grab my drinks, go sit down, have a moment, collect myself, and I came straight up here, and I just looked and realized as I'm clearing my throat, I'm like, I don't have my backup thing. That's going to make me even more nervous, and I'm going to need more my drinking more. Give Bucky a hand. Thank you, Bucky. Thank you, sir. There we go. So listen, the background, when we read this, it looks like everything was just handed to Joshua, and he just inherited the Israelites, and he inherited leadership. And the background, though, to Joshua is that he put in a lot of time into this. It seems like it's immediate success if you just start with Joshua. But if you don't go backwards a little bit and see that he actually put in some time, because trees don't grow overnight. John, you see I'm looking at you, right? Mm-hmm. Trees don't grow overnight. Great leaders don't either. Great leaders do not grow overnight. True success takes time to develop. To find true success, it takes time to develop. Now, isn't it fitting that we're talking about trees and everything for apple blossom? Anybody want good apples now? We live in this society. Back in the day, they just had to wait. Now we've got apples growing in hothouses and this in place and all over the world to where they're shipping in. We can roll in and get a good apple. We can roll in and get whatever we need. It used to be, back in the olden days, even before me, that you had to wait. It wasn't the season of corn. It wasn't the season of this. And right now, we're celebrating apple blossom. We're not celebrating the apples right now. We're celebrating the harvest that is to come. It takes time. See, we're actually celebrating here in Winchester the process. We're selling the process of the waiting, the process of the planting, the process of growing and maturing these trees. But we all want good fruit, don't we? Right? So we need to see some blossoms. We like to know that there's some blossoms, and blossoms need to come from a good tree. Bad trees don't blossom, do they, John? We don't need the plant expert to answer that one. We know that if there's not blossoms, you won't get any apples. So Luke chapter 6, verse 43 through 45, Jesus said, no good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. And the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For out of the overflow of his heart, his mouth speaks. We say that a lot around here, right? What fills you does what? Spills out of you. So, if evil's spilling out of you, evil's inside of you. If good is spilling out of you, it means you're attached to a good source. Fruit is the result of not just a good tree, it's got to have good roots. Fruit is a result of good roots. Leadership comes from deep roots. What can we learn from the life of Joshua and his rise into leadership? Private roots make public fruit. Private roots bring about public fruit. Jesus challenged that we produce fruit, and it all comes out of roots being attached to him. We need to grow some deep roots. Most trees, you can't see the roots. Maybe you might get like a renegade, some of them, spread out, and you get those ones. I hate those ones in my yard. My neighbor has them, and they, and he didn't even plant them. It was the previous neighbor. And these trees that are planted there, they're shooting all the way to my shed, and it's like mowing over these things is like boom, 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 trying to push over roots. But listen, I can't, even though I can see a root, I can't see the root structure. Roots are private. Things that we don't see. How do we develop? How we develop an impact in leadership and make an impact and produce fruit are the results of our roots. If you want results, if you want success, but you're not willing to pay the price, you're not willing to grow the root system, it's not going to happen. Are you willing to be an aide like Joshua for years following Moses? Are you willing to spend years growing roots without really being noticed and not getting all the credit that he got? So we need to have good roots, but they need to be in good soil. Good roots in good soil. Joshua 1:5, it says, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Joshua discovered that God was Moses' source of fruit. During his training, during his mentorship, Joshua was along for the ride with Moses. He was learning and gleaning from him. Moses was getting the credit and the glory and doing the stuff. Joshua was there right alongside of him. It says in Exodus chapter 17, 9 through 11, and then I'm going to skip to verse 13. But it says, Moses said to Joshua, choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. And then verse 13 says, so Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. Joshua learned that day that the victory comes from God. The victory was coming from God. It wasn't from Moses. It wasn't from Joshua and the men. It was all God was the source. It was not by his strength or his power or his ability, but it was through God, and it was in God that they found victory that day. Exodus 24, verse 13 says, then Moses set out with Joshua his aide, and Moses went up on the mountain of God. Many times we just think about Moses up there with God. Joshua was right alongside with him, just listening. Just learning. I know some of our PTs, you got people following you, right? And some of your PT students are smiling, getting ready, nervous for your rotations and things, and you're learning and you're gleaning and you're growing. Sometimes you're in a position where you just need to be quiet and listen, right? And the practicing PTs are like, yes, be quiet, don't say anything. Then there are times when you are entrusted to start taking on more responsibility. Joshua, his whole training time under Moses was learning and growing. He has little moments he got to do things, but it was mostly just a mentorship program of him learning and growing. We see in Exodus 33, verse 11, then Moses would return to the camp, but his young aide Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. That's the tent of meeting. Remember Vince talked about the tent of meeting? Remember he put his tallit on, and he said, this is my tent of meeting. Moses had a tent of meeting where he went and met with God. Joshua was there with him. Moses went out and left and went and talked to the people, and Joshua stayed in the tent, lingering in the presence of God, spending time, growing, hearing from God, learning. Moses' source, Joshua learned, was directly correlated to his time with God. It says that Moses spoke to him face to face. Moses, hearing directly from God, Joshua learned, God is the source. He's the good soil. He's where my roots need to be. Why did he linger in the tent of meeting and spend time in prayer? Because he needed deep roots into good soil. And God is that good soil. He is our source. He's the source of all good fruit. All fruit, true and lasting impact, is derived from God in us. Every good thing comes from God above. So many times we just think of like earthly blessings. Every good thing, right? A well-cooked steak. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for good steak. Right? I'm thinking of so many food. Thank you for maple donuts. Praise the Lord for those. Some of you might think it's gross, and you're not thanking the Lord. You're like, those are from the devil, right? And so many times we put these fleshly little things on like, oh, it's good or bad just based on that. But, every good gift, the good that you do in the world, so many times we like to pat our own back and be like, man, I killed it. That's me after mowing the lawn, looking at my lawn and saying, wow, I deserve a break today because that is some good-looking grass. And I just mowed the snot out of that grass, and it looks amazing. But who makes the grass grow? It's not Scott's fertilizer. It's the Lord. Who placed the sun into existence? Who created the soil? Who created the seeds to grow? Come on. Sorry, I just rained on some of y'all's parade. You're like, so what, I can't take praise for a good-looking golf course or lawn? So all fruit, everything that's good comes from God. Let's look at John 15, verses 5 and 6. Jesus says, I am the vine, and you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you ever pulled a weed, how long does it last out of soil? Withers pretty quick. Some of you have not pulled weeds. You can come over to my house. We've got plenty of mulch things that we can have this object lesson. DeMarcus, here we go. You pull that weed out, and you pull that plant out, and without water, withers pretty quick. I always point to John because he's our guru. How often do y'all water at Meadow Farms, bro? Every day. It's necessary. Without water, you got nothing. But what if they're not? How good is it watering a plant if it doesn't have any soil or roots? Ain't working, right? How long your Christmas trees last? Not very long without roots. So listen, here's the question that I want us to ask ourselves, and I'm asking you, but what are you attached to? What are you grafting your roots into? What are you spending your time most with? What about this? What is feeding the tree of your life privately? Because private roots mean public fruit. You see, some people can put on the face long enough, but eventually the truth comes out. They can put on the act and the thing, but sometimes it ekes out of them, and you're kind of like, ooh, right? You're kind of like, whoa, that was kind of nasty. Didn't know that because they had it stuffed away, but they can't help themselves sometimes. It just comes out of them. So what's feeding the tree of your life privately? Are you attached to the things of God? Or are you attached to the things of the world? Are you being fed by the richness of the soil of his goodness, of his word, of time spent with him, of lingering in the tent of meeting? Or are you spending time listening to whatever is feeding your soul? I don't listen to the words. I'm thinking of Skylar's message. Got to be careful what you listen to, right? So what's feeding you? Listen, Joshua prepared privately and grew his roots deep into God. We must prepare diligently when no one's watching. You are who you are when you do what you do, when nobody you know is looking at you. Let me say that. You guys heard that one before? You are what you are. Some of you are thinking about it. You're like, what? Too early in the morning for this one, Joel. You are what you are when you do what you do, when nobody that you know, private, is looking at you. That's who we are. That's challenging, right? We must prepare diligently when no one is watching. Not for accolades, not for promotion, but to be faithful and ready. Abraham Lincoln said, I will prepare, and someday my chance will come. Be prepared. Be ready for the opportunity. What does that sound like for me? You've got to practice. This is my second Allen Iverson alluding to example. Practice? We're talking about practice? Yes, Allen Iverson, we're talking about practice. It's important to practice. Practice is necessary to be ready for public. The practice that we do in private gets us ready to produce fruit publicly. These guys, I was blessed with some good musicians this morning, wasn't I? And they don't get good on the drums and the bass just by jumping up there and being like, hey, we're gonna wing this, and then we're just gonna figure things out. No, they practice, and what they've done over years has culminated in them having a gift and an ability to play beautifully. So many times we want the fruit, we're not willing to put in the practice. So I'm going to ask you, what do you believe God's calling you to do? What do you believe God's calling and asking of you? Maybe some of you are like, I don't know. Ask him. Ask him, what are you calling me to do? What giftings have you blessed me with? What can I bring to you, God? What leadership, what ministry, what fruit does God want from you? What does he want you to produce? What education, what training, what skills, what finances, what coaching and mentoring are necessary for you to get to where you're wanting to go? So many times, remember, we only think of this in the physical. We think of it, this hopefully is ringing true. I look at my PTs over here. Look at my college students too, right? You guys are at college to learn and to grow because why? You're thinking of, what do I want to do with my life? Hopefully, the education that you have chosen is setting you up to do what you're called to do. Some of you, your degree doesn't mean squat for what you're doing right now. Anybody like that? Anybody have a degree that didn't really affect, right? Sarah's like, yeah, I'm running a coffee shop. I didn't really go to SU for that. Yeah, there you go, right? So sometimes we go through college or we get our degree and we get our training and then we pivot and we do something totally different. Listen, we need to be asking God, what do you have for me? What fruit do you want me to produce? Grow your roots into God. Spend time with him privately to know what he wants you to produce publicly. So grow good fruit with faithful obedience. Joshua 1:7. Grow good fruit with faithful obedience. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Now, we've got to wait for these apple blossoms to turn into apples to enjoy them. But there is nothing like a fresh apple. Y'all, right? Fresh apple cider. Come on. We've got some great orchards out here, and we have some legit, really good, going and picking it off the tree and eating it. So good. Some of you are like, yeah, some of you don't like apples, and I just lost you. But there's nothing like vine ripe. I mean, in the grocery store, you're like vine ripened tomatoes. I'm like, seriously? Really? Like, but when you get a real ripe tomato that has really, truly vine ripe, there's nothing like that. So fill in the blank for you when it's fresh and it's right there for the taking. We have to wait time for these things to mature and grow to be something that is fruit and edible and successful. Joshua did not become this leader overnight. Moses' aide served faithfully in battles, commanding this ragtag army, former slave army, that lingered, and he spent time lingering in the tent of meeting. Stood on the backside of a mountain while Moses encountered God, and he was lingering and watching and learning and growing. Joshua was obedient and faithful for a very long time with what was entrusted to him. Faithfully serving Moses. Only then was he given more. Only after that was he given more. And he was challenged to be strong, courageous, and it says obedient. Do not turn to the right or to the left, so that you will have success. Continue to be faithful in what you've already been doing. Listen, leaders are developed. Success is developed through time. It's not just handed out. It's grown through training and experience. Good and faithful equals good fruit. That's something we say here. That's our testing. You want to test if y'all are dating somebody? Guess what? The only way to see if they're good and faithful is time. Because in time, what's there will be revealed. Do not rush in your relationships. Take your time. Because in time, you'll figure it out. Good and faithful equals good fruit. It must be tested. Guess what our testing ground is right now? Life. We're living in life right now. This is our testing ground. This is our opportunity for life and living. And earth is testing ground for us. Jesus used a parable to describe this a little bit. Matthew 25:21, he says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." Now, this is the same thing we imagine him saying to us when we get to the promised land. Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter in. That's our reward. That is our success. He is our success. He's the one that blesses us with our promised land. When we reach that promised land, every good thing, we talked about crowns being thrown down in our song today. Every good thing is all about Jesus. Because why? We need to be attached to him. We need to find our roots and our soil in him. Leadership is not what you think it is. Sometimes the success that you're judging and looking at, the fruit that is happening, sometimes it's not all it's made out to be. There's a price to get there. There was some sweat and some tears to get to the place they were at. Leadership and influence, there's always cost and sacrifice. Private pain and deep roots that nobody sees. Nobody else really goes through or carries. God entrusts leadership and fruit to those who are good and faithful. So I'm going to ask you, as we're pretty much wrapping up here, are you being good and faithful with what God has given you? Are you being good and faithful with what he's entrusted you with? He's blessed each one of you, and maybe you don't feel that this morning, but do you know what? He's blessed each one of you with gifts and abilities. I don't think there's one of you here that would say to our kids anything bad about what they did today. Aren't they adorable? Right? Made in the image of God. You can do whatever you put your mind to. You can accomplish whatever you want to do. You can be who you want to be. Just set out and put in the work and strive. Like, I want to be a concert pianist. Okay, great. Let's practice. I don't want to practice. I want to Allen Iverson it. Well, there's the disconnect, right? Well, you probably won't become the concert pianist without the practice. So what's God calling you to do? He's blessed you. He looks down and sees you as a kid. We're to come to him as children. What has God gifted you with? I will tell you right now, I'm not talking about your job. I'm not talking about your paycheck. Because I don't think God's actually really concerned about that as much as he's concerned about his kingdom. What I heard from Jesus is he was always like, I'm about the Father's kingdom. I'm about what is to take place in his kingdom. I'm not even of this world. You see, he's less concerned about your now and more concerned about your promised land. So are you digging deep roots into him? Are you producing good fruit for him? So what fruit are you producing? Do you have some bitter, nasty crab apples that don't taste very good? Anybody eat any of those as a kid? They're not apples, just so you know. They don't taste good. What fruit are you producing? Here's the last little challenge I have for you is bloom where you're planted. Bloom where you're planted. So many times we wait for the perfect spot. Don't wait until you're in a different location. I got to wait until I graduate to serve. I love that so many of our college students serve. Emily, thank you for jumping up and singing. Thank you for those of you that serve faithfully on the kids ministry and welcome team and do things. It's awesome. Don't wait to do what God's called you to do. Use your gifts. It's rewarding. I bet if you asked each one of them, they were like, I love it. I love serving toddlers and getting a chance. It's just nice to get a break from the crazies at college, right? And serve with the crazies in the kids' room. What are you called to do? Bloom where you're planted. Don't wait until you grow up. Don't wait. Some of you are still waiting to grow up and you're my age. You're almost 50 or older. Don't wait. I'm not even talking about this right now, but you know I'm going to get to it. But Caleb, when he was like 80, took a mountain of giants. I'm looking at my parents right now. Let's go, Caleb, 80. Take some giants down. Let's go conquer some land. God's not done with you. What has God called you to do? What giftings are in your heart and your life that he's called you to do? Your faithfulness will make room for his fruit. Let the fruit of the Holy Spirit rise up in you and start producing fruit that comes from God. So what does God want you to produce now? Some of you need to be planted in God's rich soil. Some of us need to pull some weeds. We all need to grow deep roots in God's rich soil. Maybe this morning you're at a stage where you're just blooming and you're waiting for the fruit. Maybe you're in a dormant season and you're feeling dead, but you've got deep roots growing. Maybe you need to start throwing down some roots and get ready for what God has prepared. Keep growing in God's rich soil. Trust his process, not your own. Jesus said, if a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. And so I'm going to challenge you this morning, produce good fruit. I want you to bow your heads with me. Father, I thank you for this time, and as we just get ready to respond, because every service here, we want to have a chance where we get to respond to you. God, I pray that as we seek you at the altar and we take communion or we bring our offering, that we'd spend a little bit of time lingering in your presence and say, God, speak to me. What do you have for me? What do you want me to do? And so I'm going to invite you, church, let's stand. You can keep that playing, guys. It's all right. And I want you to spend a little bit of time lingering in God's presence as this song just plays. Seek him. Go after him with all of your heart. Send some roots down into his good, rich soil.